It's a work in progress. Are we working at it?
We working at it.
That's fair.
Even though I do feel you're opportunist.
What do you think I'm getting out of it?
What you getting out of it?
This doesn't impress me. This house, none of this impresses me. Oh, I love her to death.
Well, you're going to have to prove that to me now. I got my, and I got people that, they get that.
I can live with that at least if I know it and I get it from you and I get it from everybody else.
My main concern, Candace said she don't know at what time that I stopped liking you. I didn't stop liking you. I stopped respecting you.
For years, the world watched what looked like love on display. But off camera, something far more dangerous was taking shape. Because long before courtrooms filled with lawyers, long before documents were signed, long before words stopped being spoken, a single voice had already passed judgment. Not a gavel, not a counselor, not a fandom, a mother. Those words weren't emotional slips. They were final sentences. When Mama Joyce fixed her eyes on Todd and said she hadn't turned against him, she revealed she had never stood with him. That wasn't hurt speaking. That was a decision being enforced. And in that second, the marriage didn't just shake. It was rejected. For Todd, this was never about feelings. It was about being sentenced. Painted as a user. Seen as a danger. Cast as an outsider inside the life he thought he'd earned. And if Todd is telling the truth, that ruling wasn't written after vows. It existed before rings. Beneath the laughter, beneath the toasts, beneath the smiling photographs. A cold battle had already begun. And tonight, for the very first time, Todd is no longer keeping quiet. Not to beg for sympathy, not to fire back, but to expose how one woman inside the family became the greatest threat to his union. Because when a mother closes her door to you, a marriage eventually closes with it.
She introduced Candy to Todd. I told her I could have choked her. All these lawyers and everything else that you know, you gonna introduce her to one of the workers? Yeah, that's why I could choke you, right?
The lens doesn't chase Todd Tucker that evening. It allows the quiet to press in first. He inhales like the air itself is weighted with history. Not because he wants mercy, but because what's coming next can't survive inside a single line. I avoided saying this out loud for years, he admits. But silence started to feel like betrayal. For a long time, viewers were told the fractures in Candy and Todd's relationship were the result of fame, travel, pressure, and a life lived under lights. But Todd says, that story was never real. The real issue had a face, and it shared their roof. Not an enemy, not a network, not gossip, a mother. Todd insists it didn't begin at the altar. It didn't grow out of fights. It didn't rise when the lawyer showed up. He says the damage existed before promises. You probably don't see this, he continues, but Mama Joyce never opened that door to me. Not later. From the first second. Not friction. Not awkward moments. Rejection. Todd says he was never welcomed in as kin. He was examined like a risk. A motive under investigation. A plan under suspicion. Gold digger. That's the word he heard. Not hinted. Branded. And once you wear a title in someone else's space, every move you make is filtered through it. According to Todd, if he surprised her, it was manipulation. If he laughed, it was theater. If he proposed, it was strategy. Nothing he did was pure. Nothing he offered was honest. Because once a verdict is set, you are never again allowed to be innocent. But it didn't end with him. The weight didn't stay in one place. It moved. And the first person it attached itself to? A child. Kayla Tucker. Todd claims his daughter didn't enter a new family. She crossed a border under watch. Inspected. Calculated. Measured. And in his memory, convicted. For breathing. Not just me, Todd says. My daughter wasn't wanted either. He says Kayla wasn't received with care. She wasn't shielded. She wasn't embraced. She was categorized. Excess baggage. A phrase he says cut sharper than knives. Not for how it sounded, but for what it meant. You are not one of us. Todd claims Mama Joyce didn't shout it, she suggested it, making it clear Kayla was out of place in Candy's world. Too much. Too different. Too inconvenient. And when that message is repeated long enough, it starts to live like the truth. Todd says he watched his daughter shrink in real time. Soft-spoken. Guarded. He says she figured out young, where she didn't belong. And to a father, there's no pain colder than seeing your child merely allowed, instead of truly held. But where Todd says the damage turned fatal, wasn't in conversation. It was in contracts. The prenup. Not the document. The motive behind it. Todd doesn't argue about protecting wealth. He never has. But what he says cracked him open was who demanded it, and the way it was done. God bless the paperwork, Todd says. But this felt like a trial. He claims it wasn't introduced by attorneys. It was delivered by Mama Joyce. According to Todd, the prenup wasn't presented as safety. It was issued like judgment. If you really love her, make it legal in pen. Not promises. Not years. Not devotion. Proof. Todd says he signed. He says he went along. But emotionally, something splintered. Because a marriage isn't supposed to start under cross-examination. And once that happens, trust never gets invited in. Todd says Candy drifted into conflict, torn between reason and allegiance, between a husband and her history. And Mama Joyce, according to Todd, never lost her voice. What doubt couldn't achieve, repetition accomplished. And that's when the pressure spilled wider again. This time, toward Riley. Todd claims Mama Joyce allegedly reshaped his image. For Candy's daughter. Not as kin, but as danger. A man chasing a bag. A mother dressed up as a shield. And then came the sentence Todd says shattered everything. She told Riley I was the problem. And that my child was part of it. All at once. The house became a battlefield. Mother against husband. Daughter against stepfather. Children turned against children. And Candy. Frozen at the fault line. Todd says he saw her begin to change. Not in explosions. Not in breakdowns. Just softly. Fewer battles. Less belief. More space. He says she started listening more. And within that quiet, marriages don't crash loudly. They vanish. Before lawyers ever arrived. According to Todd, there was something colder. Decay. Petty clash.
I'm just letting you know, they have suggested that we call our wedding off.
It's kind of like either you sign it or I don't want to marry you. That's not fair. Let's talk.
I'm asking you to talk. I'm asking you to tell me what is it that you wanted to say.
I want it to become a proper document. He said that.
How is it not a proper document, Todd?
I'm not the attorney.
What is not proper
Let's call the
about it?
attorney. Let's call the attorney and let him talk.
Call him right now, please. I want him to tell me what is not proper.
Come on, let's go.
Please call him. I'm not sure what Todd's attorney is telling him is abnormal about the prenup. I actually had 2 lawyers to put my agreement together. I'm not sure what they think the problem is, besides that it's good.
Well, we're going back and forth arguing before we're supposed to get married.
Exactly, because we're not going to get married if we don't have no prenup. And we sit up here arguing about that. I don't even understand why we're arguing, because if you got, you work, I work. So I'm not understanding what.
That moment wasn't a conversation. It was exposure. Marriage was no longer about feeling. It was about enforcement. And enforcement destroys what affection can't. From there, Todd says, everything fell apart at the same time. What once felt accidental began to look calculated. What once felt like tension started to look tactical. And what once looked like a mother being protective started to reveal something darker. Power. Todd says Candy wasn't vicious. He doesn't paint her as the villain. But he says she was persuaded, conditioned, rewired. He believes she never walked away from him. Her surroundings did. And once your world shifts, your alliances move with it. Eventually, Todd stopped being a husband and became a liability. According to him, nothing he did felt right anymore. Breathing felt wrong. Silence felt dangerous. Defending himself felt offensive. And when a man becomes a risk in his own home, affection dries up with respect. When asked if his heart still belongs to Candy, Todd answers without delay. And somehow, that speed hurts more than silence. I loved her. I still love her, he admits. Then softer. But pain eventually outlives passion. By the time divorce was ever mentioned, Todd says the house had already been empty for years. Court filings only confirmed what heartbreak had already finished. When he's asked the question, the one nobody wants aimed at them, Todd doesn't shift. Who destroyed your marriage? He doesn't shout it. He doesn't dramatize it. He doesn't soften it. He simply delivers it. The honest answer. Mama Joyce was the strongest force in our breakup. Not because she filed paperwork. Not because she broke promises. But because she never let the marriage breathe. And when someone cuts off the air to your love, sooner or later, it suffocates. Todd looks down, like a man finally setting something down after carrying it too long. I loved Candy, he says. But every story has a breaking point. And ours was reached long before I knew it. The camera doesn't hunt emotion. It lets it settle quietly. And inside that quiet, one truth becomes visible. Some relationships don't end because of cheating. They end because of pressure. And sometimes, the deadliest threat to a marriage is not from outside. It's from within. It didn't explode. It dissolved. That's how Todd says the marriage truly ended. Not with shouting. Not with slammed doors. Not with lawyers announcing war on social media. But with absence of warmth. of safety, of partnership. And when a marriage stops making sound, the world thinks it's peaceful. But silence, according to Todd, was never calm. It was tactical. After the cracks began to show, not publicly, but privately, something else shifted. The phone stopped ringing. The check-ins grew colder. And conversations inside the house sounded more like negotiations than love. Outside, fans were busy guessing. Inside, control was silently tightening. Todd claims a wall went up. Not between strangers. Between spouses. Information stopped flowing. Decisions stopped being shared. And something else started happening too. People around the couple disappeared. Friends who once flanked their photos stopped appearing. Family members became quiet. Inner circle faces went missing from birthdays, events, dinners. Even casual contact faded. And when a marriage's circle goes quiet at the same time, that's not coincidence. That's containment. According to Todd, the house became a pressure chamber. He says Mama Joyce allegedly didn't withdraw. She repositioned. Advising. Reframing. Redirecting. Not with shouting. With suggestion. And suggestion is the most dangerous kind of influence. Because it doesn't sound hostile. It sounds helpful. Protective. Motherly. Todd claims nearly every disagreement he had with Candy eventually echoed something Mama Joyce had said first. Not word for word, but in spirit. And over time, that's how a marriage begins sharing one voice instead of two. And Todd says, his voice wasn't winning. Then came the internet. And it didn't help. It split. Some sided with Todd, others with Candy. But the loudest group didn't choose sides at all. They chose chaos. Every old clip was replayed. Every silence became suspect. Every smile analyzed like evidence. And Todd watched his private life become public mythology. People assumed. People theorized. People diagnosed. But nobody actually knew. And when you're misunderstood by strangers, that hurts. But when you're misunderstood by your spouse, that breaks. Todd says that's when he realized his marriage was no longer private enough to save. Because resilience dies in crowds. And no one calls it a breakup when love dies slowly. They call it busy. They call it strained schedules. They call it fame pressure. But Todd claims it was never any of that. It was interference. Slow and strategic. Then one thing happened that changed everything. Mama Joyce allegedly stopped confronting and started withdrawing, which, according to Todd, was far more dangerous. No more critique. No more open resistance. Just absence. And sometimes, when someone stops attacking, it's because they've already won. Todd claims Candy became distant not out of cruelty, but confusion. Because when two people you love don't agree about reality, you begin questioning your own. And Todd says, Candy started believing less in love and more in risk, which to a husband is the same as being unchosen. In the public eye, it looked like endurance. In private, it felt like retreat. They appeared together when required. They smiled when expected. But according to Todd, it was theater. Behind the curtain, the scripts were no longer shared. The marriage didn't fight. It faded. And just like that, Todd found himself married. And already alone. Meanwhile, Mama Joyce said nothing publicly. No statements. No interviews. No clarifications. No apologies. Which only amplified everything. Because silence in a scandal is not neutral. It's powerful. And people noticed. Mama Joyce did not deny. She did not defend. She simply removed herself from view. And Todd claims that silence wasn't peace. It was positioning. Because when you've shaped the story beforehand, you don't need to react. The narrative already belongs to you. And that's when something darker settled in. Todd says he wasn't just losing a marriage. He was being disconnectively dismantled. As a husband. As a father. As a member of the family. Even communication around Kayla grew colder. More distant. More cautious. According to Todd, he began to feel like he had to schedule his presence in a family he once thought he'd built. When asked if he ever tried to repair things with Mama Joyce, Todd exhales, as if the air remembers. I tried, he says quietly, then adds, but reconciliation only works when both sides want healing, not control. By the time the word divorce entered the room, he says, the marriage had already emotionally packed its bags. The papers didn't end it. They documented the death. And outside, the world reacted as expected. Shock headlines. Opinion pieces. Former fans choosing sides. But in the inner circle, the reaction was something else entirely. Relief. Because when a relationship has been in crisis long enough, people stop waiting for recovery. They wait for release. And Todd believes that's what the divorce felt like to some around them. An ending that had been predicted and accepted without grief, which hurt more than hatred ever could. Because hate means you cared. Indifference means the story ended long ago. To Todd, that was the real betrayal. Not speeches, not fights, not accusations, but quiet confirmation that the marriage had been dying in front of everyone. And no one screamed. Now, only one question remains. If Mama Joyce truly never accepted Todd, and if Candy truly never saw the sabotage as sabotage, then who was ever really free inside that marriage? And what happens when the voice that never accepted you eventually becomes louder than the one who loved you? Todd doesn't give a dramatic answer. He doesn't shout. He just says the kind of thing that lingers after the screen goes dark. Some marriages don't fail because of cheating. They fail because someone outside the relationship never let it live inside it. And when that happens, love doesn't lose. It suffocates. And then the story stopped belonging to the marriage. It became public property. Within days, what was once private pain became public narrative. Clips resurfaced. Old scenes were slowed down. Smiles replayed like evidence. But this time, people weren't watching romance. They were reading intention. Fans didn't just ask what went wrong. They asked, who pushed first? Who whispered longest? Who poisoned quietly? And the internet did what it always does when a family collapses. It picked villains. At first, the blame went everywhere. Todd for marrying up. Candy for choosing wrong. Fame for destroying families. Money for changing people. But then something shifted. Suddenly, one name stopped sitting quietly in the background. Mama Joyce. The same woman who had once been dismissed as just protective was now being re-examined. Not with emotion, with pattern recognition. Fans rewatched old arguments, old comments, old tension that once looked like comedy, now felt calculated. What once sounded like concern, now sounded like sabotage. And when the audience realized one thing, they couldn't unsee it. Mama Joyce had never pretended to approve Todd. She had never pretended to welcome him. What changed was the audience's ability to excuse it. As loudly as the internet reacted, Mama Joyce stayed silent. No denial, no explanation, no defense, which only made the questions louder. Because when an accusation doesn't get answered, it becomes a conclusion. And slowly, without press conferences, without legal disputes, without dramatic statements, the blame moved. Not officially, emotionally. Todd went from being the problem to being the outsider who was never allowed to integrate. Candy went from being the woman who left to the daughter who never really chose. And Mama Joyce, from a protective mom to a shadow inside. What wasn't said did even more damage, because neglect has volume too. When asked if he would do it again, marry Candy, knowing everything, Todd does not answer quickly. Then softly he says, I would love her again, but I would never walk into a family where love had to be approved. And that line says more than any interview ever could. Because marriages don't just collapse from cheating. They don't always die from betrayal. Sometimes, they're quietly starved by influence. Sometimes, the greatest enemy of love is not another partner. It's another parent. Todd doesn't ask for apology. He doesn't demand sympathy. He doesn't perform rage. He just offers truth. Raw, unpolished, and possibly uncomfortable. I loved her, he says. And that part was never fake. But when you're treated like a visitor in your own marriage, it eventually stops feeling like home. The camera doesn't linger. It pulls back. Because this story isn't about who won. It's about what was never allowed to exist. A marriage. And when families fracture, not all damage leaves bruises. Some leave silence. And silence is the loudest ending of all. This story didn't end with paperwork. It didn't end with distance. And it didn't end with a silence that was supposed to mean peace. It ended with understanding. Not the kind that feels good. The kind that finally tells the truth. Because some marriages don't collapse from cheating. They don't die from betrayal. They don't even fail because of love fading. Some marriages suffocate. Slowly. Quietly. From inside the house. And sometimes the person holding the pillow doesn't even realize they're doing it. What makes this story uncomfortable is not the divorce. It's what the divorce exposes. A truth many families never say out loud. That influence can be more dangerous than enemies. That protection can look like destruction. And that family does not always mean safe. Todd didn't come forward to destroy a legacy. He came forward to explain one. To say out loud what many couples only whisper when it's too late. That love alone is not enough when control walks into the relationship wearing concern. So now the question isn't, who is wrong? The question is, who really got along without ever being questioned? Who never had to defend their existence? And who loved, but was never fully allowed inside the family they married into? If this story hit something inside you, if it reminded you of a relationship you couldn't fix, or a family dynamic you couldn't escape, then speak. Not in anger, in honesty. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Not for drama, for truth. Because the hardest stories aren't the ones that shock us. They're the ones that recognize us.